This is Dead Serious, a show about short horror stories worthy of discussion. I'm Dead Pallid, and I'm reading a sci-fi story? Cyberpunks. Today we're going to be taking a look at a story by Jethro Reading, also known as Hello There. They posted this story on Twitter, and I thought that I would take a look at it. They say here, new story up on my blog. Just a bit of sci-fi stuff for fun. Hope you enjoy it, guys. Okay. Let's just get right into this. Cyberpunks with an exclamation point. I thought the view would be better than this, you know. Ahead of Vandenberg Spaceport spread out across the horizon, gray tarmac merging seamlessly with the impeccable horizon. Weak sun seeping through the toxic Californian smog, glinted off the distant skyscrapers of a transport. Nothing moved in the dirty expanse beneath them, save the neon flickering of the sharp red lights of the landing pad. Very nice visual establishing shot here. This is almost what you would see in a script at the beginning of a scene to establish where we are, you know. But already I can tell that this is going to be far out of my wheelhouse and far out of what it is that I'm used to critiquing. But I think that that's going to be a nice refreshing thing for me, a little bit of a palate cleanser. The girl pressed her cheeks against the harsh black fabric of the boy's hoodie. Fuel pipelines and boarding walkways hung slack from the underside of the launch gantry they sat on, like the bowels of a freshly butchered animal. Got a whole lot of very crunchy verbose language here, but it's working. It's much more traditional than I'm used to dealing with. "You're really going then?" she asked, ignoring his complaint about the view. They'd spent hours getting there, bypassing security and hiking across the featureless cement desert of the launch complex. The climb up the launch tower had been long, 1,400 steps she'd counted. So this is a relatively short story, and we're basically 3 paragraphs in, but don't have a whole lot of idea of what the story is. Mostly it's just mood setting so far. "Yeah," he sighed apathetically. He took a final drag on the cigarette and tossed it into the mist below. "I know we're like in the future and there's smog and everything." Well, I guess there's already smog in California. That place is a fucking desert of smog. But we're supposed to be in some sort of space future, California, Neo-California. He should be smoking e-cigarettes, right? He watched below the orange glowing tip recede. He watched the orange glowing tip recede until he could no longer see it. The ground itself was only just visible 130 stories below them. The whole structure creaked just a little in a wind that blew it in off the sea. That line's a little confusing. I'm trying to understand it. The whole structure creaked just a little in a wind that blew in off the sea. I think it would be more legible if it was just the whole structure creaked just a little as a wind blew in off the sea. Just my thoughts. "You don't sound happy about it," she replied, looking at him. "Would you be happy if your parents were dragging you to some fuck-off rock in the middle of nowhere?" So he's being dragged off to some rock in the middle of nowhere. I'm assuming Utica, Ohio. But what we're getting here is that there is, some sort of negotiating of a long-distance relationship or something like that. She scoffed. "It's hardly a rock, moron. You're moving to Mars." "Oh, yay," he spat. "Another planet for us to screw up. Hooray for me." She frowned. "You're sounding like one of those dickhead anti-colonial terrorists." All right, so now we're getting into the real lore. Anti-colonial terrorists. Then the twist is that this is part of the Red Faction universe. Whatever, he sulked half-heartedly, looking off at the invisible horizon. A pause hung in the air, as heavy as the polluted clouds. They could hear the sound of the distant surf as the wind picked up a little, rolling in off the dead Pacific coast. "Look at the lights," she said, changing the topic. The concentric snowflake pattern had started to play on the landing pad, spiraling inward. "The 1734, back from Venus Station, right on fucking time," he said. Hold on to something, it's gonna be quite something. Kind of stumbling over that a little bit, not sure. She tightened her grip on his arm, wrapping both around him and squeezing in close. He sighed. "Fine, but if you fall, don't blame me in a couple of seconds you get before you hit the sidewalk." He sidled over slightly, hooking his arm through the triangular support strut beside him. They both glanced skyward as the roar approached. "Is that supposed to be slidled? Sidled. S-I-D-L-E-D. Am I just dumb? That's completely possible." Suddenly, like the whales of old, the Leviathan breached the heavens, sides scorched with re-entry heat. The rocket rode down through the sky, a pillar of bright fire supporting it as it descended. Flashes of bright control jets flickering on and off, making automated course corrections. Other thrusters came on and off 10 times a second, adjusting the orientation as the ship's speed slowed, eventually sliding effortlessly towards the flashing beacon. With a last thunderous crash, the engines flared up and seared a mark onto the pad. When it was quiet, save for the final creaks of the vessel settling on the sturdy legs in the Pacific wave, the girl let out a silent wow. Once the sonic booms had finished reverberating off the ground, the boy shrugged her off. "Begone, thought," he said. We should get going soon. They'll let the passengers off at the ground level, but later this evening they'll roll this gantry out and get the cargo off." She narrowed her eyes at him. "You really don't give a shit, do you?" "Thanks," he smirked. "No, not that," she sighed. "Look, you're just dull. Do you have no sense of wonder left?" "Wonder?" he laughed. "Take a look around you. What's wonderful about this?" Her mouth dropped open. "What do you mean? This is sort of amazing, don't you think? Fuck, 30 years ago, we could have never believed that this would happen. It was goddamn science fiction for them. Yeah, dystopia more like." And with that, Elon Musk's son boarded the ship, leaving that thought behind. So we're over halfway into the story, and we're just now really getting to the conflict. And the conflict is an interpersonal conflict, which I think is something that I am equipped to analyze. What we're having here are two different people with different ideas, and they're in conflict. And I think the reason that this is spending so much time on these establishing shots and world building for what is going to essentially be a single scene short story is because our male character here is trying to purposely distract himself. And it's kind of interesting that while he's distracting himself from whatever it is that he has to face, whether it's his parents dragging him off to Mars or what I'm assuming is some sort of love interest, I don't know, some female companionship, he's distracted from that by all of this stuff that is mundane to him, but is wondrous to us. The idea of, space travel and, this dystopia, even though it's, awful smog, it's still an interesting thing to us. So there's that weird juxtaposition. Anyway, we should press on before I get too far up my own ass. He looked at her, and she turned away. Her pink, half-shaven hair stretched into the wind, a rare speck of color in the Californian miasma. He looked beneath that, though the sallow skin stretched thin across her bones. Had to look up the definition of sallow. Adjective. Of a person's face or complexion of an unhealthy yellow or pale brown color. Verb. Make sallow. That's a very British word. It's pronounced cash. He could see the bumps of her spine as it went down into her violet sweatshirt. So what we're getting is that she's unhealthy in some fashion because she has sallow skin, and like the description of bumps on her spine being extremely visible. It's making me have flashbacks to Splice. Oh, what a movie. He'd watched a documentary the other day, some Martian production, and they talked about the Terran rot, they called it. Average life expectancy had been shrinking for the last 3 decades. Is that what's pulling them apart? His family's pulling him to Mars because Earth is becoming an unhealthy place to live? Look, you said something about it being like sci-fi, right? She nodded, quiet. Yes, 50 years ago they didn't have the rockets or the spaceports or even VR. Fuck it. What? She asked. It sounds stupid, but you realize California was pretty much a nature reserve back then. There were millions of animals on Earth in the tens. Now we're living in a wasteland, and we fucking build it. She slumped, resting her pointed chin at her hand. I thought you didn't give a shit. No, honey, I give the most shits. You know why we're moving there, don't you? He asked. Schiaparelli? He nodded. They're covering up the whole crater. Don't listen to what the company says. They haven't done a full survey of the area. They don't know any more than you or I. That you or I do. That there is nothing native there. She gazed at him quizzically. You mean you're being this much of a sulky jackass just 'cause of a few alien bacteria? So I'm assuming that this Schiaparelli thing is an alien bacteria that they must have discovered on Mars. It's not just there, he said. It's terraforming writ small. Once they've dome over Schiaparelli, there'll be nothing to stop them from filling up Hellas Palatina, the whole southern basin. All it takes is just one of their testbed projects to be successful, and they're going to take the whole planet and turn it into as much of a shithole as this place is. Mars may be the red planet right now, but don't worry. They'll be gray and corporate within a few years. So this, up until this point, has been able to, without having a fish out of water, explain its scenarios pretty well. We're going to be terraforming this place, I guess. It's not an alien bacteria, it's a place. Schiaparelli is a place, I'm assuming. But here I think we're kind of getting into a problem of having 2 characters to give us perspective, and then there's no outsider perspective to confirm or deny whether what they are saying is true. We're speaking from the perspective, the perspective of young people who don't have agency over their lives, aren't afforded the ability to make their own decisions. Their parents are the ones making decisions for them. And so when they say that it'll be gray and corporate within a few years, that is something that could either be true or that can be a very juvenile mindset seeping through, and it's unclear on which one it is. When you hear something like life expectancy has been declining for the past 30 years, that's much more solid and concrete, And I don't think we're going to get enough time in the story to see Mars, develop in that way. Maybe I'm talking out my ass, but that's just how I feel. She stood up and stretched. The boy noticed goosebumps on her bare calves and shivered himself. Well, as you said, I better get going. You gonna come? He shrugged. Nah, I'll wait here a little while. See ya. She walked off a little way along the gantry, back to the staircase. There were heavy clouds coming in, and she briefly worried about thunder striking the gantry. She looked over at the boy, and he was already staring off at the recently landed transport. Hey, look on the plus side, she laughed. Keep this up, and you might be the first punk on Mars. She heard a brief chuckle from the boy. Without turning, he raised his fist and flicked up a middle finger at her in response. As she started down the staircase, she gazed back at the boy sitting at the end of the gantry, his legs dangling over the drop. A cloud engulfed the top of the tower, and he disappeared into the gray. So he committed suicide, or he got engulfed by the clouds as they were rising up? The smog miasma clouds were rising up. I'm assuming the way that I'm picturing this is that his legs are dangling over the side, and he's dropping off right as the miasma is rising up, just incidentally. A little confusing, but I do like that before that there were heavy clouds coming in, and she briefly worried about thunder striking the gantry. Shows that she is forward thinking and that he is not planning on the future. He's given up in a sense. And there is this feeling when you're young and a punk, this mentality of futility, that things can't change, that things are just destined to be one way and that things will not get better. And he's got this conflict of whether he needs to give a shit or not. And he made his decision. It was a pretty punk decision. I think that when it comes to the visuals of, California and the skyscraper and all of those kinds of visuals, they've done a nice job of establishing those. But the name of the story is Cyberpunks, and I would like to see more of the punk aspect of this. I know that, Cyberpunks with an exclamation point, there's a level of being sardonic in that, but there very much so is a punk aesthetic that is mentioned at the end, and I think should be brought forward throughout. I think that this could be developed more and not extended too much because it's a short story and it's supposed to slap you in the face, but maybe just another paragraph or two worth of flavor text about the aesthetics and style of our two main characters would go a long way. I'm kind of also unclear on whether the female character is staying or going. I also wonder about the economics between them, whether the boy in this scenario is more well off and the girl is less well off, and there's that kind of power dynamic there. I think that would very much so play into a universe like this. So these are the questions that I have thinking about this story. It certainly wasn't perfect, but I really like all of the descriptions of the scenery. But please do let Hello There, Jethro Reading, know what you think down below in the comments section. And if you think it's worthy of it, go to the Twitter link and like the tweet and retweet the link to the WordPress page that has the story in it. Now, if you enjoyed that, consider helping out the community and supporting my channel. You can support the community by conversing in the comments below, going to creativehorror.com, that's creativehorror.com, for a whole host of horror-based podcasts specifically for artists, writers, and anyone creative. You can support me by subscribing to the channel, following me on social media, links down in the description, and pledging to my Patreon, which is also down below. Thank you so much for your time, and now on to our sponsor at this non-moment in time. Simpsons Wave. Simpsons Wave. Sad boy aesthetic, but in yellow.